Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by SDR Pods. Learn how we can build you a fully equipped sales development team to execute on personalized multi-channel prospecting and book you more meetings at the link below.
Everyone knows that the success of an outbound campaign comes down to relevance, and relevance comes down to two things: the right combination of targeting and messaging. So before you can even think about crafting the perfect messaging and launching that campaign, you need to know who you should be reaching out to in the first place. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning your tires with low open rates, low response rates, and low conversion. I'm your host, Sarah Hicks, and today on the Predictable Revenue Podcast, I'm going to be chatting to an expert about hunting your zebra, how to profile your perfect prospect. He's founder and CEO at Zebrafi, the guided selling cloud for the enterprise that helps sellers find great fit prospects with the help of AI. He's the award-winning co-author of Selling to Zebras, How to Close 90% of the Business You Pursue Faster, More Easily, and More Profitably. And as a former executive at Bond USA and COO at Bond Supply Chain, he helped grow revenue $743 million in 5 years and participated in the Bond IPO, which achieved $12 billion market cap. Jeff Koser, welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast.
Hey, Sarah. I've been looking forward to it ever since you and I chatted about it.
Me too. So Jeff, as we mentioned in the intro, you are the co-author of the award-winning book, Selling to Zebras. So we've got to ask, because it's going to be really relevant through the episode, what the heck is a zebra?
Exactly. Well, in our parlance, it's more than a zoo animal. It's the perfect prospect for your business. And the reason we call it a zebra is because even when a 3-year-old takes a look at a zebra at the zoo, they know they're looking at a zebra. They don't mistake it for a hippo, even a purple hippo, right? Or anything else. So it's that visible, and a good prospect, we say, should be just that easy to spot.
Awesome. Well, obviously there's the book, and then you also have an ebook on the same subject. What types of ideas do you tackle in this book?
So the book itself talks about, what we really have is a selling system, and the book talks about the entire selling system from, as you mentioned, prospecting appropriately, building a business case, selling it, but then also making sure that the business case is actually achieved. So it takes you from end to end. And it talks about why everyone in the organization that touches the customer has to have an understanding of the philosophy and also the business problems that you solve for your customers. And then the ebook gets more granular, because when you write a book today, people want to be able to read a book on an airplane ride, if we could take an airplane ride, right? And they want to be done with it when they get from one coast to the other. So my publisher wanted to pull out a bunch of pages because, well, that was the goal, right? So then we wrote other ebooks, and one of them is How Do You Actually Build Your Zebra, which is a little bit more granular and helps companies get started on their own if that's what they'd like to do.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to get into some detail on exactly that in a little bit here. But before we get into how to actually define that dream prospect, that zebra, tell me, why do you think so many companies have their ideal customer profile wrong?
It's because where they start with their product, and everyone falls into that trap of talking, especially if you come out with a new release or you're a startup and you have just the product. We all feel pretty proud of it. It's got some exciting things. Hopefully it's got something that the competition hasn't thought about. So we want to lead with that, where most customers, most prospects really don't care. It sounds crude and maybe a little mean, but they're business executives, and the person we call power really wants to buy something that solves a business problem. Mm-hmm. And then you can, if there's economic value attached to solving that problem, or if you create an opportunity for them, if there's economic value attached to that, that's what they want to hear about. And when you start with your product, you start you start in the wrong place in terms of how you want to communicate with that prospect. And until you talk with your customers and you find out why they bought and you talk with them at an executive level, we say you really don't even know how to communicate to your own customer base.
Got it. So if you're not starting with this really clear ideal customer profile, if you're not starting with your zebra, you're missing out on basically the foundation of how you should even start the kind of selling process or buying process with this person.
It's so profound that we end up selling the wrong types of customers. And many of the things that are sold today are sold as a service. It doesn't matter if it's software or if it's products. Most everything is evolving into selling it as a service, selling a result. So it's easy for companies to buy, but it's also easy for companies to shut you down. And when you sell to the wrong customers, they tend to sap your resources as you try to make them happy, and then they just churn anyway.
Right. Makes sense. Well, let's get into it then. Teach me how to find my zebra.
Well, your zebra, so we break it down into 7 attributes, and it's all about opportunity scoring. So it's different than lead scoring, right? Lead scoring, we might attach a value to somebody downloading a white paper or a case study or some other offering of value that we put out there. But opportunity scoring is really all about the 7 things that you want to measure on every deal. So it starts with what type of companies, where do you do well? And it's not just the demographics, it's the culture of that company. And we have ways of kind of getting at that, and how does that align with yours? And then the second one is operations. And operations is about the types of business problems they have that you solve, and then the value, where you bring the most value. And those first 2 are in strategic order. And you want to make sure that those are a fit before you try to get to the next attribute, which is the attribute that we call power. So power, we don't give it a title because power doesn't have a title. It could be CEO, could be the CEO, COO, could be C-level, could be VP, could be director level, depending on what it is you're selling, right? And that individual is hard to get to. You have to earn it. And we want to make sure that the first 2 attributes are a fit, company and operations, before we even try. Because as you know from experience with your business, it takes many touches, many quality touches, before you can even get somebody to raise their hand today, right? So it's an effort. So the 4th attribute is funding. So that's the classic, do they have the right level of payment expectations for what it is you do? 5th is value, and that's really where the business case comes in. 6th is technology. And somebody might ask, well, what does technology have to do with me if I'm not in software or I'm really not a high-tech solution? Well, the reality of it is every industry has technology involved in it today. It almost doesn't matter what you do. So it's that component that either works for you or against you, either because you have a strength or your competitor does. And then 7th is service. What level of service do you have to provide in order to deliver on the value that you position and that the customer will expect? Okay,
I'm going to recap that for our listeners now, so you guys can pause the episode and jot all this down so that you can have this think about your zebra. So there are 7 attributes. I'm going to rattle them off for you. The first is company. Next, number 2, operations. 3rd, power. 4th, funding. 5th, value. 6th, technology. And 7 is service.
Ding, ding, ding. Nice job.
Nice. So, Jeff, give us an example of a company that you've worked with, what they do, and then what their zebra is following these attributes. So we can kind of attach an example to each of these points, each of these attributes.
Really good question. So, Tubular Labs is a company that started with us as a startup, and they're emerging now into a larger, more established company. But when we first started with them, they're the types of companies that they were. So let me tell you what they do first. So they have technology that evaluates all the video out there in the world. So there's like 8 billion videos out there now. And if it's on YouTube or if it's on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, they have technology that finds it. and they can evaluate it from a standpoint of what's the particular target audience, who is the creator of that, who is the influencer, if there's a star of that particular video, how is it trending, up or down. They can determine things like, how is the influencer trending, up or down, what genre do they appeal to, those types of things. So that's what their solution does, and where it fits. So the type of company they're looking for is an organization where they have digital analysts that study this type of thing, and those analysts spend a lot of time trying to figure out where to properly spend advertising dollars on the right videos in the right places, kind of along the lines of the attributes that I just described that their solution identifies. So they go into it deeper in terms of company and in terms of cultural fit. It's someone that would actually have such a need for this that it would end up in their actual workflow. So a daily type of activity. From an operations perspective, they're looking for a company that actually wants to be a disruptor as opposed to being disrupted, right? So someone that's a little more progressive, maybe along the lines of Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, somebody that's an innovator or an early adopter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now a little bit more early majority because it's becoming more and more mainstream. I mean, if McDonald's or Procter & Gamble or some other consumer products company is going to advertise today, they want to know everything about where they're advertising, especially in light of what we've read about Facebook right now, where sometimes advertising gets, in a pre-roll might end up in front of something that you don't want your product associated with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's company and operations kind of at a high level. And then power for them is typically someone who owns the digital marketing side of a business. So those titles can be chief digital officer, can go all the way up to the CMO, chief marketing officer, for example. Funding. So it depends on the type. If it's a broadcaster like traditional cable who's looking to get into digital, or if it's a digital first company, it would be different. Or if it's a brand that's looking to leverage video in their digital advertising, for example, or just buy better when they take a look at what the options are. And then value, we built a model for them in our software that literally has all of the value drivers. Do they want to monetize a digital audience? How do they monetize it? How do you measure that? How do you quantify the growth? What does it cost for a digital analyst? How many do they have? Because we know from customer research within Tubular's customer base how much more productive we can make a digital analyst, and it's pretty significant. So that there's good top line value for them, there's good bottom line cost reduction, and then there's a productivity piece. So that's the ROI or value component. And then service. They sell their product in such a way that the person, the interesting thing about it is the data's already there. So day one, you turn it on, everything you need to drive insights are already there, interestingly enough. But you've got to learn to become a good question asker to really get good information back. And that's what they help them become. And then finally, I did them out of order. I've only been doing this for 20 years. I did them out of order. The one before that is technology. And technology is that they literally provide a feed into their SaaS platform where all that data is live on all those videos, and they create a leaderboard, and in your particular genre, they can show you where you stack up against your competition, which is a key thing that they do in terms of that's another one of the components of their Zebra. They want companies that want to know how they stack up against the competition and want to be benchmarked that way. Mm-hmm. So did that bring it to life a little bit for you?
Definitely. I think that's great. I think it's great to be able to kind of visualize who fits into these, company opportunity power, just for an example, just for some context, because it's a great kind of step-by-step of working all the way from that foundation of company through to all the way to service. So yeah, thank you so much for the example. That is really helpful. And you guys have actually created a bot that allows you to find a zebra for free, right?
We have. That's sort of the next evolution. So once you have a So each one of those 7 attributes gets scored, and they turn from red to yellow to green. And once enough of them are in the yellow or green, the whole opportunity turns green. And once they're green, you can click on our bot, and we'll go find more that are just like those folks are. So now you've got a place to start with a prospect who's probably soon to become a customer that's looking really good for your business, or that you've already closed. You can click on them after that as well.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to share some information on that bot at the end here to make sure that you guys can take full advantage. But that's a great segue. So we've talked a little bit about your scoring system. We've talked about how it's a little bit different from traditional lead scoring, and it involves this kind of color system. Tell me exactly how your scoring system works.
So each attribute, and this is particularly important for strategizing, each attribute turns on as you score it from, as I mentioned, from red to yellow to green. So company, I mentioned that we really want it to be in the green. So we want it to be in that higher score. We want to know from the homework that we did that we think it's a good company fit for us. Second one is operations. We want to find evidence that they have the business problem that we've solved really well for other customers. That then means that one turns green. If those first 2 are green, next is getting to power. And this is often where most deals stall. We either don't have the tools to get to power, we haven't properly identified who power is, and or we don't work hard enough to do that before we engage. And power, if power isn't green, we literally don't score anything below it. So that puts the focus on making sure, even if it's just a brief conversation, just to say, do you have this problem? And if you could solve it, would it be worth solving it? And then, my team and I will do the work, but we just want to know that, right? We just want that confirmation. So once power turns green, now you can score funding, value, technology, and service. And those will stay red, yellow, and green until you've satisfied those details behind each one of those attributes. And when you score it, the attributes that are red or yellow, that becomes where you strategize. So now you need a strategy for turning those green, because what we teach to be nice salespeople and be courteous salespeople, you haven't really earned the right to ask for the business until you do turn those attributes green.
Okay. So in terms of kind of how the actual numerical scoring part works, it's quite, you've got quite a large space for red, a kind of medium-sized space for yellow, and then it is a really tiny kind of, it's the highest percentile that turns something green. What is the exact kind of measurement or kind of benchmark for each color?
So each one goes from 0 to 4. And a 0 and a 1 is red, 2 is yellow, it's sort of neutral, and a 3 and a 4 is green. And then, like you indicated, all 7 then add up into a score that turns the total opportunity from red to yellow to green. So theoretically, when you're newly starting out a new opportunity, if those first 2 attributes are green, it is a zebra. Now the total score will still be red because you're just getting started, but it's worth pursuing, and that's part of the magic of this process. The next magic is make sure you get to power, because that's what's going to shorten sales cycles, either because you find out that it is a priority, the person would support it if you had a solution, or you find out it isn't and they wouldn't. So you start faster, you end faster. And then finally, you don't waste any resources, your time, if you're a salesperson, or any other organizational resource like sales management, or maybe technical resources, or business development for that matter, or even client success if they're not a zebra. And then the total score adds up, and if the total score is less than 17, means it's 0 from 16, it's red. So again, you're just starting out, and you mentioned it's a little bigger on that bottom end. And then yellow is 17 to 22, so it starts to narrow. But yellow ones are within striking distance. If you can convert enough attributes to higher scores, you've earned the right to ask for the business. And green is 23 and above. And my son, who helped me write the book, used to call that the Be Like Mike score. Canada, you know, I don't know if you guys were as attached to Michael Jordan as most of the rest of the world was. Well, the beauty of the 23 is it's also David Beckham's number, and he's a famous soccer player, right?
Yeah.
Which is maybe some of you know even better, right? So it's kind of the Be Like Mike or Be Like David score. That anything that's a 23 or above, it's green, and you'll close 90% of those. And we know statistically from doing this way before we ever had software, we were doing this with Excel. And we can help our clients predict with 90% accuracy using this what they'll close and what they've actually earned the right to close, in fact.
That's pretty awesome. What an amazing scoring system to know that with that accuracy. And you talked about so the first three things that we want to nail down and make green being the company, the opportunity, and then the power. Those are the kind of most important foundational pieces. And then everything after that in the list may sit at red or yellow until it is converted to green. So how can we work at converting, say, a yellow to a green in the last bits of that list?
Yeah, so you're a good question asker. You should use Tubular. So what typically happens as soon as you build a business case, you know, let's say a salesperson builds a business case and it looks really good. Well, the immediate inclination is to want to turn that green because they built it, you know, and we have software that helps them do that by just answering a couple questions. But I don't want to turn it into an advertisement. But what happens is you look at a good business case, you go, oh, this is green, but you haven't shared that with the prospect yet. And you haven't collaboratively worked through it so that you can get them to challenge it, to verify it, and commit to the belief, not only that it's possible and it's for them and for their business, but that in a lot of ways, when you're asking someone to verify it, you're really asking them, do you mind if this becomes one of your KPOs or KPIs for next quarter, right? Maybe even a bonus attached to it. So that's what we teach is it doesn't get turned green until you verify it with the person that has to own it.
Okay.
And once you do that step, an amazing high percentage of those deals will close. That's kind of the deal tipping point, if you will, right there.
Okay, got it. So you've got to get buy-in from them that they are indeed agreeing on each of these different points. And in doing so, you give them an opportunity basically to object. And you sort of, in some ways, come out ahead of those objections because instead of having these unknown objections that you're just trying to roundabout kind of cover all your bases, you just hear exactly what the objections are on each of those attributes.
You do, because you're really hitting them head on with the things that we suggest that the impetus for building a business case comes from your customer. And we call that voice of the customer research. And when you do that, when you create your business case based on what your customers said were the reasons they bought, the problems or the opportunities that it helped them achieve, and then the value that was created, what you're doing with that prospect is you're working them through this type of exercise where you're able to say, look, you might believe or not believe that this is possible for you, but this is what we've done for companies that look just like you. Mm-hmm. This is what they achieved. And they had some of the same trepidation that you probably have. And that's kind of that piece like you were mentioning of hitting it head on, right?
Right. Got it. Okay. So the kind of last thing that you have mentioned before is kind of the turning a selling cycle into a buying cycle. So tell me about what you mean by that.
So none of us like to be sold to. Even salespeople don't like to be sold to, right? So what you really want to do is you want to flip around the way that you communicate with a prospect and have it be a collaborative process where they're the buyer and you actually create a buying cycle, which means you sell it the way they would want to buy it and in fact the way you would want to buy it. That's why we recommend You start with business issues that you verify that they not only have, but that they care to solve.
Mhm.
That's kind of that opt-in or opt-out piece up front. You walk them through your zebra and you say, now this is where I bring a lot of value and I think you fit, but let's decide together, because if you don't, there's lots of other zebras out there for me and I'll go spend my time there, right? And then the next aspect of that is, like we talked about before, once they say, yeah, that sounds like me, then you present your preliminary business case, a hypothesis of value, if you will. And you say, look, this isn't right, but it's directionally right because I based it on what I've done for other companies that are very similar to you.
Mhm.
And I got this information from my customers, or a third party got it from my customers. And this is what they said was the value that we could create. What I'd like to do is the next step is verify this. Let's see if we can show you how this could be done for you with your people in your business. And again, that's that opt-in or opt-out, because if you can't build the verified business case, you're basically saying to Power, you won't bother them. You won't come back.
Mhm. I think that's such an interesting piece because I think salespeople get this bad rap of kind of pushing to the close and not giving that opt out. But I do see recently more people are kind of catching on with what you're saying here about you've got to give the buyer the opt out from the beginning, because ultimately you're not going to waste each other's time if it's not a fit. So I think this opt out piece is a really, really important one.
It's really important, and the thing that another thing to think about, that from a prospect's perspective, they might believe that, well, they will believe if you present voice of the customer case studies, they will believe that others have achieved it because you have it there in print, maybe even in video. It's even better. And they will believe that you as a company have actually achieved that level of success for your customers. Those first two things they will believe, but that's not what stops them from buying. They know you've got references, they know that you've helped others achieve it. The reason that they don't buy even a cost justified solution is because they question in their own mind if they or their people can be successful. That's the number one reason somebody doesn't buy a cost-justified solution, one that they even verified. So what this process also allows you to do is assess the people that would actually be working with the solution and determine how much help do they need. And then you design a proposal to make sure that you give them enough help so that you can look Power in the eye and you can say, look, in addition to the product and the services, I've designed enough help in here to help Bill, who needs a little extra help. And that's one of the gaps we found, and that raises your solution price, which means your average selling price goes up. But the irony of that is that actually makes Power feel more comfortable because you've taken away the number one thing that probably was making him or her nervous to begin with.
Okay. So how would you, when you're on a call with a prospect with your Zebra, how do you dig in and find those things? You might find that, this VP sales is my key decision maker, but I don't necessarily have a lot of information on kind of everyone that's on their team or something, all the people that might be, as you're saying, kind of use the solution that I'm providing them. So how do you identify those gaps that they might be worried about there?
Well, when you do the voice of the customer work, you find out who was involved in the decision. So you find out who Power was, and a lot of times companies don't even know who signed off behind the scenes on the solution. So they never met Power, and they, much less have a relationship with them. They never even got there, right? So this process ensures you know who it is at the beginning. You almost always get to meet the people who are going to use the solution. Those are the user buyers that are going to become the day-to-day interface with you and your company and your solution, and you continue the relationship with them. But this process allows you to identify who are all the people that would have to sign off before you would actually get a piece of business. So when you do your homework, you're going to want to identify who holds those titles or similar titles in LinkedIn, through LinkedIn, right? Everyone knows how to research through LinkedIn today. You also take a look at if they're a public company. We recommend that you look at the earnings call transcript. And the best place to go, earnings call transcripts are rather boring, but if you blast through the beginning, which is all marketing speak anyway, right? And you go to when the analysts start asking the questions, that's where the truth is. And they start asking pointed questions about, gee, last quarter you said you were going to do this. And you had this problem. What did you do about it? That's where you can find nuggets where there's opportunity to link to problems that you've solved for other companies. And business, especially at an executive level, is actually more simplified than most people think. There's really only 7 things that power thinks about on a regular basis. Notice there's 7 attributes to the zebra, and there's 7 things that power thinks about. Well, that's because there's 7 dwarfs, there's 7 wonders of the world. No, just kidding.
Just good.
So they think about revenue, reducing costs. It's RRCCCEP is the acronym that it came up with. You can't pronounce it, but it helps me remember them. So there's compliance, there's customer satisfaction, there's employee satisfaction, and there's productivity. So that's all that power thinks about, is those 7 things. So everything falls into one of those 7 buckets. And you can find those things riddled throughout everybody's zebra, and you can find them in things that are published about the company, whether it's a news article or in that earnings call transcript that I mentioned before. So that's how you earn the right to start to penetrate at a meaningful level. And even if you penetrate at a lower level, let's say for Tubular, a lower level would be an analyst level. That's the user buyer, right? Even for them, there's easy talk tracks, and these are in our book. But what you want to say is, look, there's, in addition to yourself, who would have to sign off on this project before it could get purchased? And the irony of asking that question is that most of the time a digital analyst won't even know what it will take to get a deal done in their own company. So you're actually doing them a favor when you ask that question and you say, look, we've got a process that if this fits you and you really see the benefit for your position, we just want to have a 15-minute conversation with your boss or your boss's boss. And we think that's Sarah Hicks because we did our homework, right? So we'd like to talk with Sarah briefly just to see if Sarah would, if we could prove we have a solution that would build a business case, that she would want to sponsor that. And that's something she'd want to address in 2020. And then we'll do all the work after that. And we'll engage with you and we'll turn it into a buying cycle we think that you'll like. And then you describe what that looks like. And that's a different experience than they've probably gone through with anybody else, if they've looked at anybody else yet, or ever experienced if they're even someone that's gone through lots of buying cycles, like a CMO or even the VP of digital strategy or someone at that level, for example.
Right. They're not expected to go basically complete that sale for you. You address that as quickly as possible in that power step of the attributes so that you can loop in all the best decision makers right off the bat. And then you, of course, continue to involve that user, that end user, buyer user, but then you've got the conversation going with those that are actually going to sign off on it from the beginning.
That's a very good point, actually, because, and that's thinking ahead point, which you're good at. Exactly. I mean, sometimes prospects want to go sell it themselves, and that's rather dangerous because it's almost like if we took a salesperson for our own company, the very first time they tried to help somebody buy, right? They're not going to be real good at it because it's their first one.
Yeah.
So they're gonna need help. And when you present in this way, we call it guided selling, and when you present in this way, they'll realize that they're going to want to have you as a pro along with them. And if you've verified the business case together, it's perfect that you're all in the room, whoever participated in that, because ideally it's their business case now, not yours. And that's, purchasing loves it when an executive sponsor comes with a business case and there's impassioned people who are going to implement it, and they say, we're going to go get this value. That's perfect for them because they want to negotiate deals where there's clear path to success and success is defined.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that brings us to our final point. So for all the listeners out there, they know they've jotted down the 7 attributes, so they know how to define this zebra. They know how to score that zebra every step of the way. And we've mentioned from the beginning that this is the most important piece. This is your foundational piece before you can even begin to prospect, before you can even think about doing outbound. You need to know this piece first. So what do you think is the next piece? What do you do after you've defined that zebra?
So once you define the zebra, you really have to talk to your customers to verify that you've got it right. Because even when companies do this on their own, define their zebra, it's going to be full of product stuff. It's not about the customer. It's not about how they view you, and you'd be amazed at how they view you. If you ask some questions along the lines of, if you hadn't bought our solution, what would you have done? That starts to define what they maybe were doing or how they viewed the problem. How would you have even thought of solving this problem? How close to solving it would you have been with that other solution? That's another way of deriving at what made you a competitive advantage over someone else. Those are the types of things that you want in your zebra, not the, Tubular has some really fancy algorithm names around some of the things they do, but nobody at the executive level understands what those are, and nobody cares, right? Mm-hmm. What they want to know is there's this nice blue line on a chart that they produce that shows of the things they're doing, which ones are underperforming. And you can see if they're below the line, they're underperforming. If they're above the line, they're overperforming. That's an executive level message. Mm-hmm. And what is that all about? It's about video or sponsorship of videos that are performing the way they had intended. And it's got data to back it up. Mm-hmm. So the next thing is to check it out with your customers to see if you have it right. And then you start scoring some deals and you determine, does it fit your best prospects? What did we leave out? Because that sort of puts the meat on the zebra bones, if you will.
Right. So you've got to keep coming back to it. Don't kind of do it once, say you've got it, and then rush forward. Keep coming back to the zebra, keep coming back to the deals that you have, the deals that closed, just to kind of continue to verify. And it could evolve, right? If you're the type of service that's adding new features or product that's adding new features, this might change. So definitely something you've got to continue to come back to.
In a dynamic company, it'll change easily every 6 months.
Interesting. So if you keep coming back to that, you can keep making sure that you have that ultra relevant messaging to that perfect target.
That's exactly right. And then the final piece for your business is make sure that everybody culturally understands that you're not done until that prospect. So that whoever power is, they're going to make promises about what they're signing up for. You have to make sure that all those promises are actually achieved. And if everybody culturally understands that you're done when those are achieved, then you're helping that client get success, and that will lead to great success for your business as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave our listeners with their homework of finding their zebra, following this awesome process. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the show and giving us this kind of data-driven way to really nail down our ideal customer. I think it's so helpful. And obviously a lot of our listeners are thinking about doing outbound, and we agree that number one, the first thing you've got to do is nail down that ideal customer, and you've given them a really amazing way to do that. So thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thanks for being a great question asker. You obviously understand the topic.
Good. I'm glad. Then I've done my job. If people want to get in touch with you and they want to learn more from you, how can they do that?
It's easy. It's Jeff@zebrafi.com. That's ZEBRAFI.com.
Perfect. And you have some actual wonderful little gifts for our listeners of this episode. The first thing that you're offering them is a free copy of your audiobook. Tell us a little bit about that.
So our audiobook is our award-winning book. selling to zebras, and it describes everything that we've been talking about. And it's a parable. It's a story about a guy who's in trouble and his business is in trouble, and how he pulls out of it. So it's easy to read. People say it's enjoyable to read. Concepts are easy to understand. And it was narrated by my partner Brian, who had fun doing it. He has multiple voices in it. There's a boss who's not very enlightened boss, and you can tell who he is right away.
That's awesome. Well, we'll share that link for you guys so that you guys can listen to this audiobook. And the other thing that Jeff is offering is a free copy of that sales bot that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So tell us about that one too, Jeff.
So the version of it that we offer for free is web-based. So you just enter the website of either a client or a company that you say is a really good customer of yours, and our bot will find 5 more that are zebras just like it.
Awesome. Well, we'll share the links to that too, so you guys can take full advantage. Thanks for listening, everybody. And thank you so much again, Jeff, for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was fun, Sarah.
Bye, guys.